What are we doing in the black community? The number one consumer of a Mercedes-Benz
Who's us?
us. The number one consumer of a Gucci and a Louis Vuitton, us. And they don't even advertise. Why is it that in the black community, we are always the number one consumer, but we're not the number one creators?
So you just said it, the fact that there's consumers and creators. For so long, we assume success based on consumption.
Welcome to Closing the Gap Podcast, Truth About Black Wealth. I am your co-host, Mr. Eddie Richardson, here with our host and owner of Hamilton Wealth Advisors, Mr. Wilbert Hamilton. And you are tuned in to B94.9 on your FM dial. And also you find us on YouTube and anywhere that you get any of your streaming podcasts. Just look us up, Closing the Gap Podcast, The Truth, where we come to tell you the truth about black wealth. And today, we're going to talk about the chinks in the armor.
Yes, sir.
And sometimes that happens, right? When you're going through life and everything doesn't stay like it needs to stay. Everything doesn't stay whole. Sometimes things break. Sometimes things get a little slit in it. And there becomes some problems and you get a leak. You know, in the church, there's a song we sing that there's a leak in this old building and I got to move. You know what I'm saying? Because they know that, hey, I'm not going to stay here all the time, but I'm going to move to a building not made by man's hand, right? And so in this building that we are in, that has been made by man's hand, we see so many different changes, ups and downs, peaks and valleys that happen in life, but especially as we strive to do here on this show is tell the truth about black wealth. And we do that when we talk about finances. We also make sure that you understand the foundation of faith in God that centers us there to be able to achieve any type of financial success that we have. So when we tell the truth about it, we want to look at it from a holistic perspective. And as you are going through these peaks and valleys, it is important that you continue to trust in God and to trust in your plan. We've been talking all this year.
Mm-hmm.
You got to put a plan together. You got to have a plan. You got to have direction. You got to have your objectives. You have to understand what you are striving to do. You have to identify those things within yourself to go forward. And so you can't allow what is going on in the current market to dictate your perspective and what you do. You must already have your plan laid out. And if you talk to God about it,
Absolutely.
then you won't have much worries. Ecclesiastes 3:1 says there's to everything there is a season and a time and every purpose under the heaven. So this is the time we're in.
Mm-hmm.
We can't change it, but what we can do is make sure that we have our plan laid out of how we're going to move forward.
Absolutely. And like I said, there's always a reason for the season. And right now, we're in a season of uncertainty. Like I said, it's been a season of change. And the change comes in a lot of different ways, shapes, forms, and fashions. So we've had some financial change. We're shifting seasons from winter, to spring. So the flowers are blooming. And so everything's always constantly in, change. It's constantly revolving. So, we have to make sure that, we're doing the same thing. We're constantly evolving. We're constantly changing. We're constantly growing. And like I said, we do that, in a number of different ways. Obviously, that relationship with Christ keeps us growing, keeps us developing, keeps us getting better, keeps us giving us a greater understanding and greater meaning as to what life is all about and what should we be doing, with the time we've been blessed with here on earth. But also it helps us to learn to make the most of our time,
Right.
By making sure we have that plan. And, so when times like this happen, we kind of have some solid footing. We built that house on solid ground. We didn't build that house on the sand. So, we're always asking, and a lot of people are asking me right now, just as an advisor saying, Mr. Hamilton, we just, things are so uncertain right now. Things are, I don't know whether go left, go to right. Should I buy more? Should I sell more? What should I do with my 401ks? All these questions and not enough answers. So unfortunately, it seems. And, and we always go back to that main driving force as to what the why is and how we're going to close the gap. And, I always say trust. And people always look at me crazy and say, well, it's not a financial you know, you know, you know, nugget you can give us. There's not an investment nugget you can provide us. That's going to be the reason. It's not real estate. It's not stocks. It's not bonds. It's not mutual fund. There's no one thing's going to help us close the gap. And I said, no, it's always trust. And right now, you know, we don't have a lot of trust, you know, in the world. You know, we don't have a lot of trust in our leadership. You know, we don't have a lot of trust, obviously, in the markets and how things are moving. So, you know, I always ask the question of what happens when the world no longer trusts us and it's trusting our economy. And we're seeing some of the effects of that right now. You know, we're seeing what happens when, you know, there's a lack of trust in the market. You know, when there's a lack of trust in the leadership and direction being provided, and we're seeing these huge swings, you know, left and right, you know, an amazing, you know, loss in one day, an amazing gain the next. And then we turn around and lose it all back again the next day. And then we come back a little bit the next. So it's a constant seesaw. You know, we're swinging from left to right, and there's no consistency. And the reason why the market is operating that way, because the market doesn't have trust in the overall leadership and direction of the economy. So when you don't have trust, not having trust in anything creates volatility. So we can think about our own personal relationships. If you don't have trust in your marriage, that marriage is going to be a little bit more volatile. If you don't have trust with your siblings, it's going to make that relationship a little bit more volatile. You know, with your parents, you know, with your friends, with your coworkers. Anytime trust is broken, it creates a level of volatility. And that's what we're seeing happen in the market right now. There's not a lot of trust on either side. You know, there's not any trust globally in our economy. They're losing some of that trust that, you know, we've had and we've held so near and dear, and what has made us the preeminent power and the economic force we've been in the world for so long is because there was a level of trust that people had in our economy, in our leadership, that always kept us at the forefront. And right now that trust has been shaken, and we have to figure out, how do we manage and maneuver when the world no longer trusts us?
So let me ask this, Will, with that. First question is, what made everybody trust us in the first place?
What gave us trust was consistency. What gave us trust was policies and procedures. What gave us trust that they were economic indicators, and you could bet exactly what was going to happen based on what the economic indicator said. So people knew when the stock market was up, bonds may be down a little bit. When bonds were up, that meant that more than likely stocks were probably down. There were some reciprocation on both sides. There was some, we could read the tea leaves. There were some signs that said, if we're doing this, then they're going to do that. Well, right now, because we don't have any idea what the leadership is going to do next, it creates a level of uncertainty. So everybody's reacting. Is why we're seeing, you know, tariffs one day, no tariffs the next. You're seeing, you know, Canada say we're going to, you know, have tariffs against this, and we're not going to tariff that. You know, you're seeing Mexico and China, and you're seeing Taiwan and China come to an agreement, you know, or in regards to trade, when these two countries are consistently at odds. So, you know, one thing we have to be very careful about is that a lack of trust here will put other people in communication. And once someone starts to communicate with someone else, trust there is being built. Because a lot of times, you know, we lose trust, and we lose out on relationships. A lot of times because of poor communication. So while we've been at the forefront and we were communicating with everyone leading the charge, well, some things that the leadership has done, he's pulled out of NATO. He's pulled out of some of these world organizations. He's pulled out and he's made enemies of our friends. So once everybody's heard that old saying, the enemy of our enemy is my friend. Well, now that we've made an enemy of some of our friends, they become friends with some of our enemies. And all of a sudden, once they start having communication, what that could potentially lead to is us being the odd man out. Because people can't trust, even though I believe the world knows that it's not all of us that they can't trust. It's just the particular leadership we have in force right now is what they don't have a lot of trust and faith in. but that affects our bottom line and our dollar. So people are seeing their 401k react because there's a lack of trust in our government leadership, not necessarily because our economy is not good, because Trump has had the benefit of inheriting the greatest economies really any president has ever received. Well, you look at how the success we've had in GDP, you look at the low employment rate that we've consistently been able to improve upon. You look at, where the stock market overall in itself is and the profitability of the company. So when you look at overall the financial health of where our economy is, where real estate is, where, government profits are, the diversity within the companies that we have, and everything, of course, is big tech and AI right now, but all companies have done well, across the board. So we've been in a situation where, because of the inheritance that he received, either from Obama, and then, of course, now from Biden, because those individuals were big on policy and procedure. They were big on checks and balances. So now, usually what happens when you put in checks and balances, usually there's a little bit of pushback, right?
Correct.
If I let my son go do what he wanted to, all of a sudden I tell him to sit down and be quiet. At first he's a little jittery, like, hold on, man, I want to get out. I might have to bring out the belt every now and just to reassure him, hey man, I need you to sit down and don't move. But once he's trained, I don't have to ask him more than once, please sit down and be quiet. And he does it. Well, we've been trained that way under Obama and Biden from an economic standpoint. Well, Trump comes in, and what does he do? He deregulates. So look at the economic situation that he left us in the first time that Biden inherited. He inherited a strong economy. He left us an economy going backwards. He deregulated the banks. He basically dismantled a lot of the, CDC policies and procedures that were in place that could have helped not prevent COVID, but have it not be the epidemic or pandemic that it was if we'd have had certain policies and procedures in place. So, there were things that have happened and that he's doing that creates a lack of trust that makes the market more volatile, that makes it, feel a lot more rocky for the everyday individual, for all of us that are, looking at our 401ks and investment accounts and we're wondering what's going to happen next. That lack of trust, that lack of uncertainty is what's giving us all a little cause for pause right now.
All right, got it. Okay. So I get that. And so for some of us, and now as a result of that lack of trust and various countries not wanting necessarily to do business with us, not trust us, how should we move forward financially then? What should we do with our money? How should we, review our retirement accounts? And then, so that would be my first question is, what should we do with our money? Should we still trust the market, even though, things are not as trustworthy? Then if so, what should we do in the market? And then I would say a third question, would be, the second question would be, should we even trust the market in this time that we are in, where we have so much volatility in the White House, where you set a policy in place and then the very next week we get a post on Truth Social and everything changes. So how should we move forward?
Well, I tell people all the time, you got to be in the game to win the game.
Okay.
You can't win the game from the sideline. One thing about, the market is consistently itself. And, old folks say, when somebody show you who they are, believe them. There's nothing wrong with the market. The market is not bad. The market is not necessarily good. The market is just that, the market. The problem is when people get into the market, not understanding the market, and they get into it and they misrepresent themselves in the market. And what I mean by that is, if I've saved $20,000 because I want to put a down payment on the house next year, and I take that $20,000 and I invest it in an aggressive stock-based, tech portfolio right now, because I hear tech is doing well, I want to make some money, and I put it all in tech right now. Well, if that portfolio drops because we're having market volatility right now, is that the market fault or was that my fault for putting it in an ill-advised position? See, that's what we talked about, kind of a few shows ago. We talked about time horizon. We talked about your risk assessment, your risk profile, and, all these different things that come into play that you have to address. And that dictates how you go into the market. So what happens is all too often, people blame the market when the market didn't do anything wrong. The market has been great and made millionaires after millionaire after millionaire consistently. There were more millionaires made out of COVID due to the market than anything else. The market is going to consistently be a place where you can see the most consistent return on your dollar. The problem is when people go into it ill-advised and then they want to blame the market. No. We got to address yourself. We got to take some accountability on ourselves. That's why we've been preaching all year. We got to have a plan. Let's write it down to make it plain, because once I design the plan, I understand what my goals and objectives are. I know how I should utilize the market. So I can't get mad at the snake for biting me when I knew the snake was a snake from the beginning. I have to understand coming in what that snake is and who that snake is going to be. It's not a matter of if the snake is going to bite me. It's just a matter of when. The market is going to be positive usually 70% of the time. Okay. There's going to be that 30% of the time. There's just things that are going to happen and we can't control it. And the market is going to have to correct itself because that's the nature of our economy. So the trick is not to get mad at the market, but to make sure you're not misaligned with the market, to make sure that you have a plan, a goal, and objective when you go in. So I tell people, I said, well, before you invest it, first off, how much can you afford to lose? But if you can't afford to lose none of this, we can't afford to put it at risk. Just step number one. Let's keep the main thing the main thing.
Risk.
It is a risk. It's always a risk. But we want to understand the type of risk we're taking. And then based on the type of stock or mutual fund or ETF that you're purchasing, there's a different level of inherent risk with each one. Stocks are going to be the most volatile because you're buying an individual share of a company and you're relying on that company to be successful. If I'm buying a mutual fund or ETF, well, I'm diversifying my risk because now that is a mixture of stocks and bonds put together to meet a certain risk profile. So I can diversify my risk and lessen the risk by buying into a mutual fund. And there's various different mutual funds and ETFs that meet different, categories, some more aggressive, some more conservative. So you still have to make sure that you're going into the right type of mutual fund or ETF. So even though it's not as risky as a stock, there's still some inherent risk. So if it's a tech-based ETF, well, guess what? Tech is still going to be more volatile than anything else. Well, you still have some risk of loss, but guess what? You've diversified the risk. So instead of just buying, NVIDIA or just buying, Microsoft or Google or AMD, you're buying all of them. And now you have the group theory where instead of just, one finger trying to push this door open, I got my whole hand pushing this door open. So I put my whole hand on the door to push it open. I take one finger off. I still got 4 fingers pushing it forward. So we got that, that support that the others provide. So understanding just how to use it and not allowing, our emotions and our own personal greed, because we're all naturally optimistic when it comes to our own future. We all sit back and we think about the best thing that could happen. We all, man, if I hit this, man, if I get that, I would do this. I've thought about the lotto that way. I said, man, if I go across the line and might get me a lotto ticket, man, if I hit that lotto, man, I'm gonna do this, this, and this. Now, I think about it. I didn't even stop and buy a lottery ticket, but I'm thinking about what I'm gonna do with the money I'm gonna get from the lottery ticket. So we're all overly optimistic because we always want to see the best in anything that we're doing. The problem is we don't address what could happen that we don't want to happen. And that's what has to happen first and foremost before you invest your money into anything, and making sure you're taking on the right amount of risk to go with the kind of reward you need. Like I said, if I got 20, 30 years to retirement and I don't need that money next year to put down on a house, well, now I have a lot more leeway. Now I can be more aggressive and I can ride the wave, so to speak, and I can take the bumps in the road and have time to come back. So I always tell people, and people hear this all the time, a lot of advisors say this: just leave it in the market, hold on, it's going to always come back. And that is a true statement. But the most valuable part of that conversation is always your time. Time is the most valuable asset when it comes to making money. Because if I don't have enough time, there is no coming back. So that's the question that has to be answered for everyone before they invest the funds into the market and not blame the market. You have to make sure that you've identified the purpose, goal, and objective for these funds.
So what we're saying is you want to take calculated risks. You want to get with somebody that you can trust, a company that you can trust. And that's why we come to you on the show here at Closing the Gap Podcast, The Truth About Black Wealth, is to let you know that Mr. Wilbert Hamilton at Hamilton Wealth Advisors is a place that you can trust with your plan to invest in the market in this time, in this season. And we'll see you back after this commercial. Welcome back to Closing the Gap Podcast, Truth About Black Wealth. I am your co-host, Mr. Eddie Richardson, here with our host and owner of Hamilton Wealth Advisors, Mr. Wilbert Hamilton. And you are tuned in on radio dial at WATV V94.9 on your FM dial. Also, you find us on YouTube at Closing the Gap, The Truth, Closing the Gap, The Truth. And then also you can find us anywhere that you stream music and podcasts, Spotify, iTunes, wherever that may be, Apple Music, you can find us there. All right. We're going to jump back into this show. We've been talking today about the chinks that are in the armor, chinks in the armor, how we've been riding this wave, these highs and these lows due to our president and the administration and what they're doing with the tariffs, and the stock market is wavy. There's a lot of distrust that is in society right now as a result of this. Everybody is wondering, where do I go? Where do I put my money? Some people that have reached retirement age are somewhat afraid of retiring right now because they've seen their retirement accounts dip and they are wondering, what should I do? And we know that these types of things create fear and in society. Whenever you get a chink in something, whenever you get a hole in something, because a chink in the armor is only a slit or a hole where we become vulnerable. All right, that's why you're talking about chink in the armor. It's a spot of vulnerability, and right now we are vulnerable in the stock market. We are vulnerable as an American society because we have tariffs, because we are not at the table. There are not a lot of these negotiations. Our president is wavy, I would say, to for lack of better terms, on what he's going to do and how he's going to do it. I dare say that they do have a plan, right? We saw that in Project 2025.
Yep.
We knew the tariffs would be in place, but then what has happened is, after they've been implemented, because right now they're not responding, other countries are not responding in the manner in which I believe that he and some of the people within his administration desired. Now he's making adjustments. But the key in that is for us too, that right, while I don't necessarily agree personally with some of the things that are done, how they're done, right? But the lesson for us is, when we're talking about chink in the armor and when you find a slit, is how are you making adjustments in this time?
Yes.
What are you doing for you, right? Here on this show, we've been constantly coming back, talking about putting a plan together, writing it down, making it plain, sticking to it. We've been talking about getting with reputable financial advisors. Preferably, we want you to come to Hamilton Wealth Advisors and see Mr. Hamilton for all of your financial needs and planning. But even if you don't, on a previous show, we told you the types of qualifications that you need to look for in good financial advisors, right? So our main goal is you. All right? We're not here to bash the administration, the current administration, or to promote them. We're not here to bash the previous administration or to promote them. Our whole goal is to tell the truth about Black wealth, so that our listeners will be able to Be all that God has called you to be. We want you to have the success that God desires for you. We want you to have the wealth that God has desired for you. We want you to be able to build wealth not only for yourself, but also for the generations to come behind you in your family line. Why? Because we did not get here on our own,
Absolutely.
right? Myself, I'm not here because of my own doing, but it's because of God and the relationship that God calls Mr. Hamilton and I to have. He's not here on his own, but he's told you in previous times it's the faith of his mother and his father and the teachings that they gave and the opportunities that came as a result of how God has led and guided him to this point. So in that, what we want you to realize is that you have to constantly stay the course in what you're doing, but the only way you can stay a course is if you have a plan.
Absolutely.
If you don't have a plan, you don't have a course of action to follow, right? And so I know many of you have questions and you're wondering, as Mr. Hamilton, he gets calls, he gets text messages, he gets emails about the market. And what I want to give you encouragement is in Ecclesiastes, the teacher said that time and chance happens to everybody, right? The race is not given to the swift, nor the battle to the strong, nor bread to the wise, nor riches to men of understanding, nor favor to people of skill. But time and chance happens to them all. What does that mean? What does that mean? Well, that means that time and chance, no matter how fast you are, no matter how strong you are, no matter how smart you think you are, no matter how rich you think you are, no matter how much favor you think you have, it's only time and chance. And that's what the stock market is stock market is time and chance. So, Mr. Hamilton, if you could, what would you say if somebody is asking the question, is the stock market safe? I know we kind of touched on it a little more, but I want you to go a little bit more in depth. Because as we talk about that time and chance and letting people know that it's not everybody, you know what I'm saying, it's not necessarily a particular skill set per se. And so with that, let the people know, is the stock market safe right now?
Well, I was safe is a relative term.
Okay.
To me, it's safe
Mm-hmm.
because I understand it.
All right.
To someone who doesn't understand it, it won't seem safe at all. So I'll tell you, safe is a relative term when it comes to the market.
Mm-hmm.
Now, based on your objective, the market could be very safe right now, or it could be very troublesome right now. I think where we talked about staying the course, but you don't stay the course if you have a plan, that's what makes the market safer. If you don't have a plan, there's no way you can have any safety. But if you have a plan, that means you've addressed the good and the bad. You've looked at all the pros and the cons. And before you entered into it, you understood what could come with it. So from in that terms, if I know what's on the other side of this door, and I decide to open this door anyway, well, I'm telling myself, well, I must feel safe because I opened the door and I'm going in to see what's on the other side. So now when I don't know what's on the other side of that door, that's when I have a little bit of insecurity. That's when I don't feel quite as safe. And we've all been there. You know, it's late at night. You know, you hear a knock at the door. You know, you're a little nervous about opening up and seeing what's on the other side. But as man of the house, you gotta get up and you gotta go see. And you gotta make sure you grab whatever you gonna grab on the way down, whether you keep a bat by the door or a stick or broom, whatever you can get your hands on, something else that can be utilized in certain situations and circumstances. I believe in my Second Amendment rights as well. So, I come prepared because I'm a little bit fearful because I don't feel as safe because I don't know what's on the other side of the door. Now, when we have a plan and I understand that, I'm planning for retirement. I've sat down with Mr. Hamilton. We went over and we planned to look at my pension, my Social Security, my 401k contributions. I'm saving on the side into my Roth IRA. I'm doing all these things. So I feel safe with what's on the other side of the door because I prepared myself to be able to endure whatever it is. The problem is we don't feel safe because we don't have a plan. We haven't sat down and got a full understanding. we enter into things all too often with limited knowledge and limited understanding of them. And usually it's only with the understanding of what we feel like is going to benefit us. It's like when somebody want to tell you about, a new place you should go check out. They tell you how good the food is. They tell you how beautiful the ambiance is. They tell you everything except for how much it costs. And you find out how much it costs when you get there. You look at the means of what I see why, you left that part out. You told me how good everything else was, but you didn't tell me how much it costs. That maybe would have changed my opinion on seeing this place. So now all of a sudden I'm seeing this place. Hey, that place ain't too safe for me. That place is a little too dangerous for me. It's a little too dangerous for my bank account. It's going to cost me a little bit too much. So you know what? I'd rather go somewhere else where I know the quality of food, I know the ambiance, and also I know the prices on the menu. I feel safe going here. I feel safe going to Papa Do's. I feel safe going to Paris. I feel safe going to, walk-ons or wherever you may go to enjoy lunch or dinner with your family. You know why? Because I've been there. I know what's on the menu and I know how much it costs. Now, there's new restaurants that pop up all the time. And what we say, do you know somebody been there? We always ask, have you been there yet? Who's been there? They got any reviews? We're trying to get all the information we can on this restaurant. But one thing that most people fail to ask?
What's that?
Is what is the price on the menu? They ask, man, is it good? How does it look inside? What's the vibe in there? What's the clothing and the attire that, this restaurant has? Do they have a dress code? What's going on with it? We've asked everything except for how much does it cost? And that's probably the first thing we should be asking. And the same consists with our retirement, our financial livelihoods. We ask everything except for how much could this cost me if I get in and all of a sudden I don't like it? How many times we end up going to that restaurant, that new place, and we get in, man, the food terrible, the service ain't that great, and then they got the nerve to charge me what they charging for this meal. Now I'm highly disgusted at that particular point in time, but I could have done my due diligence and probably researched and found out that information ahead of time. I may not have known how bad the food was going to be or how bad my particular waiter was going to be, but guess what? I could have found out the price of that menu before I went.
That's right.
You can Google and pull up every restaurant got a website where you can go and do a deep dive. But how many people are actually looking at the stocks, bonds, and mutual funds in their 401k and actually getting what we call the Morningstar report on those stocks, bonds, and mutual funds? Well, that's a deep dive into every stock, bond, and mutual fund that you can find. It'll give you how much are the eternal costs for this mutual fund. What is the trailing 3, 5, 10, and even 20-year historical performance on this particular mutual fund? All these different details. What is the level of volatility that this mutual fund holds? What are the actual stocks inside of this mutual fund? So there's always information that we can go and find out to give us greater insight. The problem is most people are doing a surface level job when it comes to evaluating what should be the second most important thing to them. Outside of their relationship with Christ and their family, next should come your money. Because I promise you, if you ain't taking care of your money, your relationship with your family ain't going to be that great. Especially if you the man of the house and you the leader of the house, because either they treating you nice, there's such stress and pressure on you that you're going to be feeling it when you talk to them. And we've all been there. Every person that especially if you're a man of the house, I believe a man is cared to be protector, provider, prophet, priest over his home. So it's your job, and one of your most important jobs, obviously, to provide for your family. So if you're having financial stress and financial turmoil because you've made a bad decision on how you invest your money, either in your retirement or outside of your retirement, well, that's going to affect your relationships. I'm not going to be in a great mood if I just lost half of my money and it's my fault. But you should take the personal accountability and say, you know what? Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. So now, all the people that's under the sound of my voice that have gone through the 2020 COVID pandemic, and you lost some money at that particular point in time in the market, and you did not go and seek professional help in that moment, and now you're going through a second crisis in a 5-year time frame. If you haven't sought out professional help since then, that's shame on you. Because you have to take some personal accountability. We can't go and change your investment portfolio for you.
Right.
We can tell you go where you can go to get some help to change it, but we can't change it for them. So, understanding that it's not the market fault. Don't get mad at the market, but being of good understanding and having conversations will allow you right now to maybe position yourself to be able to take advantage of the market. So I'm thankful right now that I work the way I work, because since this started happening, the market started going crazy with of course, with the tariffs over the last, just say 2 to 3 weeks, last month. I'm yet to have a client call me and say, Mr. Hamilton, what we going to do? I said, well, and people are like, well, what? Ain't nobody need to change that? I'm like, no. Before my clients went into the market, we had the conversation as to what we were going to do if this thing happened. We planned for the worst, and then we hoped for the best. So now the only conversation that I'm having is, how much are we going to buy because the market is now on sale? So the most money is made in times of confusion. This is why the current administration likes the chaos, because the right hand can't see what the left hand doing. There's a lot of money being made. You actually heard him telling a joke in a meeting at the White House where he had, I think the owner of Charles Schwab and several other business owners. Yeah. He was talking about, hey, look, he's happy he made $900 million yesterday. He's happy he made $2.5 billion yesterday. He's happy he made $100 million yesterday. Now, the majority of people don't see that and don't feel that. They felt the opposite because they were the ones taking the losses. But what happens when we start panicking, the majority of people do the exact opposite of what they should, because they listen to public perception, not educational information. So we all know, and common sense says, the goal is to buy low and sell high. But historically, people do the exact opposite. People right now, I've talked to people that have contacted me that have decided to take action. And I hear a lot of people say, Mr. Hamilton, when this stuff started going crazy, as soon as I lost money in the past couple of days, I moved all my money into cash. Now, I'm not going to say whether or not there was a right or wrong answer. But I do know that very next day, the market came back, and a lot of the gains that you lost would have come back. Right. So always get the professional help before you make the move. But they're making moves without getting the professional help. So you sold when the market was down. But now you want to buy when the market goes back up. Whereas that's just the opposite of what the rich do. And it's why the rich get richer during these times, because he's putting pressure on the people who can least afford it, and they're going to sell. While the people who can afford to buy, who save, to plan, the people that are like the ant, that are stored up all winter and been getting prepared along the way. Yeah. They're in position to now insert capital into the market because things are on sale. Then we have to just look at it with common sense. Is that, do I want to go to the mall when everything is marked up 25%?
Not at all.
Or do I want to go when everything is marked down 50%? Well, that's how you have to look at the market. Right now, the market is getting ready. It's already on sale, but there are bigger sales still on the horizon because, unfortunately, I hate to tell you, but we probably hit rock bottom just yet. There's still more to come, unfortunately. So as this happens, but if I now know that, now how do I take advantage of it? If I know that now, well, you're still going to work. That means you're still making money. You're still earning income. How much can you save? I'm trying to put my savings on steroids right now and save as much as I possibly can so I can put my own money into the market so I can take advantage of what's going on right now. Because unfortunately, we live in a country where the poor feed the rich, not the other way around.
Nah, mama.
When the middle class starts suffering and start going into foreclosure, who's buying those houses? Big private equity companies have bought more real estate than anyone else. So when things go on sale, people who can afford to buy, they buy. Unfortunately, people who can least afford to buy only buy when stuff is full price. And that's why people have this misconception about the market. And is the market good? Is the market bad? I tell you like this. There's no such thing as a bad product, but there is a such thing as bad product placement. We'll be right back after this commercial.
Welcome back to Closing the Gap Podcast, Truth About Black Wealth, where you're tuning in to us on WATV V94.9 on your FM dial, also on YouTube at Closing the Gap, The Truth. Also, you find us anywhere that you do your streaming, whether it's Spotify, iTunes, or wherever that may be. You can look us up at Closing the Gap Podcast. We are here to tell you the truth about black wealth. And we've been talking today about Chinks and The Armor and how we don't have much trust as America in the world right now, right? We've been talking about trying to stay the course, right? Time and place comes to everyone. There's a time and a season for everything and a purpose under the sun. And our purpose here doing this show is to tell you the truth about black wealth. We care about you. And that's why we come here, is to teach you and lead you and help guide you to trust in what God has for you and to figure out what God has for you if you don't know yet. And then also how to manage your finances so that you can build wealth for yourself and for the generations to come. So we've been, one thing that you said on the last segment that really stuck out to me was about good information, right? Good information. And you talked about that Morning Star report and how many of us, myself included, how those of us that are not qualified to do what you do, right? And we may try to do investments on our own. And while there are some people that are successful in doing that, the main key of what I heard you say was going to the right place to get the right type of information. And that's where we have to be mindful, right, of what we do and how we do it. Is where are you going to get your information from? Are you just listening to us? Well, we will even tell you, don't just listen to us. There's a statement that says trust but verify.
Absolutely.
All right. So you need to get proof of anything, any type of advice that you listen to. And one thing that I've learned in school and doing research papers, and those of you that have done research papers in high school, in college, and whatever phase of life that you are in, or you just learned it by living, is you always want to gather a few different sources that are talking about one thing in order to determine which way is the right way to go.
Correct.
Right. And that's what we promote here, is gathering the right information. And I would say, Will, that we're in a social media age. Here we are as well.
Yeah.
On a radio show. We are podcasters as well, right? So we are somewhat of the pot calling the kettle black. But the difference is we have studied and we have gained the acumen through God and through our studies to say the things that we say. And yet, even in what we say, we still tell you, don't just trust us.
Absolutely.
All right. So when I say this statement, I don't want to down ourselves, right? But there are a lot of people that do podcasts and do social media that just plain and simple are not leading and guiding people to the truth.
Absolutely.
They are striving to, I would say, fleece the people, where they are striving to gain wealth during times of crisis. Because that's something that I think we have to address too, is, as you said, most wealth is made during times of crisis. Well, that is true, but then also within that, some wealth that is made in times of crisis is done because of fear. And in the midst of fear, people begin to listen to anybody that comes across. Any type of presentation that comes, and there are a lot of people that are advertising their coaching and different things online, and we're not knocking anybody's hustle. But what we want to tell you is beware of the scammers. Beware of the scammers, right? A lot of people like to talk about church. They like to talk about pastors, and pastors have before social media. I tell you, man, that I would say that pastors and churches have been getting the brunt of that talk, right? Just because if they're in the church, they call them bootleg preachers, and if they have a Cadillac, back in the day, or now they got a Benz or a Tesla or something that's nice, and they're wearing nice suits, right? The preacher gets attacked and said that he's scamming the people. Well, we do know that is a possibility, but everybody that looks successful isn't scamming.
Absolutely.
But then also there are some that are scamming, right? And then that goes true. What I want you all to do is don't just attack the preachers in the church. Pay attention and call everybody out.
Absolutely.
That's doing some scamming.
Call
right?
a spade a spade.
Yeah. Hey, matter of fact, it's some of y'all who have friends that are scamming people in the profession that they profess to have. You know that they don't have any qualifications. They hadn't done any type of work in that field, right? And sometimes in some things, you can become an expert through practice, through making the mistakes. You may not have gone and taken a class from anybody, gone to anybody's school, but you've done the work consistently in that, and you've read the books. Because when you go and get any type of certifications from different places, right, that's what we do.
Correct.
We study, we read, and then as a result of finishing the course, we get the qualifications for that particular thing. There are some people that are smart enough to be self-driven and do that. But I guarantee you that there are many more scammers that are out here, and we don't want you to get scammed.
Absolutely.
We don't want you to get scammed.
Well, I'm real big on, anytime you're talking to a professional, someone who says they're a professional, I'm always curious. Tell me how you pay your mortgage. Tell me how you feed your family. Because that's what you do. Whatever pays your mortgage, that's what you do for a living. So a lot of people out here and they're saying, well, they're a mechanic by day, and they're own mechanic. We all do mechanics, but they are financial advisors by night, or they're, teachers by day, and then they're tax preparers by night. Now, I'm not saying that those people can't be intelligent individuals, but one thing we've learned is that you can't serve two masters. Anything that you're doing from 9 to 5 that pays your mortgage, you're going to give probably the most attention, the most emphasis, and you're going to have the most success doing it because that's what you do the majority of your time. Anything that you do outside of that, not that it can't be successful, not that it can't be beneficial for you, but how great will you be at being able to advise and help somebody else? See, because there's a difference in being, educationally intelligent, but lacking in experience in knowing how to execute. See, I deal with that on a day-to-day basis at my job because everybody's an expert in the stock market right now. Everybody can tell you what to invest in, what stock to buy, when you should buy to the market, when you should sell. They give you all this advice. We've never advised not one client, doesn't have a portfolio on his own, but they've listened to a few podcasts. They bought a few stocks on Robinhood, but now they're a financial guru and an expert. I don't even call myself an expert in the market. I'm very knowledgeable on the market. I have great insight and access to what's going on in the market. And I have a higher probability of success because of the access to additional professionals and what I would call experts in the market. So I have access to real analysts, real money managers. I mean, I'm not talking about people who manage thousands of dollars. I'm talking about people and teams of people who managing billions of dollars that are doing it on a day in, day out basis.
Yeah.
So when I'm saying my access to information is different, yeah, it's going to be a little bit different. My insight, and I mean not calling myself an expert, but I personally oversee 9 figures in money.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I got a pretty good, advantage on what's going on, the questions that are happening, the conversations on things to come. What are the money managers and the traders on Wall Street actually looking at when they're making these decisions? So if I don't call myself an expert, I find it very hard to call someone else who doesn't do this for a living to pay their mortgage an expert. Doesn't mean you're not knowledgeable.
Mm-hmm.
You can be extremely knowledgeable, and you could have actually had success for yourself trading. But I would tell you there's a different thing when it comes to actually advising someone else, because there's so many other factors that come into play. There's that person's time horizon. There's that person's risk. There's that person's experiences.
Mm-hmm.
See, a lot of times people will say, well, this is how you should do something. But they haven't addressed the experiences that a person may have had up until that point in time that may make them have an adverse reaction to doing it that way. So now you must have an alternative course of action, because much like the GPS, when we plug a destination into it, it always gives us more than one route to get where we're trying to go.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to be flexible and be able to maneuver. That's what being a true professional, someone who has not just an insurance license, but someone who has actually securities license that carries a Series 7, a Series 6, a Series 65, Series 66 license. These are licenses that are not just limited to insurance courses, but these give you the actual insight and knowledge. It says that you actually can sell stocks, bonds, mutual funds, ETFs, a number of different types of securities products. So if someone doesn't hold one of those licenses, but they paint themselves out like a financial advisor, and they'll tell you, oh, I have some things I can help you plan your retirement. Well, how can you help someone plan for something when you don't have access and you can't sell everything that's available to them that can be sold?
Mm-hmm.
But we have a lot of people out here, especially in our community, that are simply insurance agents only. But they paint themselves like they're financial advisors, and they're out here giving financial advice, and they're telling people when to pull their money out of that product and when to pull their money out of the market so they can put it in a fixed product that they can sell, because that's all that they can sell. So they're giving very one-sided information because they can only give you what they can offer. So if I can't sell, or if I can't provide stocks, bonds, mutual funds, and ETFs, I'm only going to promote what? Those fixed products.
Yes.
So they end up in a situation where they talk negatively or talk down and say, oh, the market is bad, the market is this. No. Too much of anything can be bad. There's a thing what's called being overly insured. If you got all this insurance, but you ain't saving nothing for retirement, you're not putting anything into investment short term, well, you've only planned to die. You haven't planned to live. Now, to most people, you want a little bit of both. I want to leave my family well in my death, but I also want to live well while I'm here. So we always have to have a healthy balance. And unfortunately, when you work with someone who's not licensed, not certified, and doesn't have experience is life's greatest teacher for all of us.
Correct.
So when you're talking to a financial advisor, someone calls themselves a financial advisor, just ask them, say, look here, how many clients do you have? What is your typical type of client? What is the average tax bracket of the clients that you talk to? What is the average dollar amount that you manage? These are all questions that are very commonplace in the actual securities or investment world. People have these kind of questions all the time. We just don't know, unfortunately, to answer those questions because we haven't met with a lot of professionals, and we see someone on social media, unfortunately, who label themselves as a guru, but all they have is an insurance license, and we take them at face value, and ultimately it causes more damage than good. Now, that person may be an expert and be the best at insurance, but if I'm not licensed to sell investments, which means I haven't gone through a class and been certified and passed a simple test, I don't say a simple test, but passed a test to gain insight and knowledge, well, that tells me something about the individual. how disciplined are they to their craft? If they're not going to be disciplined enough to be a full service advisor where I can advise on everything when it comes to your financial livelihood, but I'm trying to give you financial advice, well, that should be a red flag to you that, guess what? They've taken some shortcuts, or they're not willing to go the distance to fully prepare themselves to be the best that they could be at whatever they've been so-called called to do.
Yeah. Because I think sometimes we want, well, not sometimes, but we want success, right? I trust to say that there's everybody that wants to be successful. The people that tune in to us, they want to be successful, even though that don't want to be successful. Everybody wants a level of success, but too many times we lack the discipline.
Correct.
To stay the course, to follow through, to get to that point of success. And so as a result, we end up taking shortcuts. And when you take shortcuts to success, what you end up finding out is there are no shortcuts to success.
Absolutely.
That every time you take a shortcut, then you're going to have to go back and repair or redo those things that you thought you were cutting out, right? Because the direction is the direction. The pathway is the pathway. Now, as you said earlier, GPS gives us multiple ways to get to a destination, right? And it gives us a time layout to get to that destination, but none of those pathways that the GPS gives us is a shortcut. Correct. None of them are going to speed us up there. Some of them, there may be less traffic that are there, right? Or you may be on the interstate and, you know what I'm saying, a straight shot, and then where I don't have to go through any lights, but yet I am going to have to drive there, or I'm going to have to get on some type of transportation system to get to that destination. So there's no shortcuts, right? So we don't want anybody to take shortcuts. Don't listen to the scammers. Don't listen to those things. Look, stick to your plan. Follow the vision that you have. And I know that sometimes vision gets murky, right? My vision got murky, so I had to go and see an optometrist and get glasses, right? And that's okay. When your vision gets murky on where you're trying to go, your optometrist is Hamilton Wealth Advisors to assist you with your plan, the vision that you have, so that you can be able to see clearly to the destination that God has designed for you, so that you can have your wealth stable, so that your wealth can be a good foundation for you and your people. Because why? Scammers and predators and shortcuts only lead to more confusion. All right. And scripture said that God is not the author of confusion. God will not create confusing situation. God creates clarity. God creates peace. Yeah. God provides direction. God provides peace for us in the midst of the circumstances. When confusion arose in the storm and the disciples were in the boat, Jesus walked out on the water, and when he got into the boat, he said, "Peace, be still." And so we are coming on this show telling you, peace, be still. Stay comfortable. If you have a plan, stick to it. If you have not, we are in April, if you still have not written out your plan, we want to encourage you to let you know it's still not too late. Right? It's still not too late. That's why even when we're talking about the stock market, right?
Absolutely.
And all that's going on right now with President Trump and the highs and the lows and the tariffs that are going on, the market is still a great place to invest, but you still just need a plan. And so if you have not written out a plan to invest yet, now's still the time to do so. If you don't have a plan for your life laid out yet, today is the day to write that plan out. Get on your knees, pray, and ask God to give you the direction that you need, the understanding that you need to be able to open your mind, open your eyes, so that you can understand and see a pathway forward. We want you to be successful in this season of life. We know that trouble is coming. We know that the building seems a little shaky right now, but when you built your hopes on nothing less than Jesus Christ and his righteousness, right, then you will have comfort and peace. And no matter how many chinks and slits get into your armor, you can repair them Why? Because you know the repairer of the breach. You know the one that makes everybody whole. And that is our Lord God and our Savior, Jesus Christ. So look, we want to encourage you as we close this show. Make you an appointment with Hamilton Wealth Advisors. Or find you somebody to talk to about your finances. Get on your knees, have a conversation with God. Ask God to lead and direct you to the right place and what you need to do right now. Don't worry about what's going on in the markets. Be peaceful, be patient. This is the cycle of life. To everything, there is a season under the sun. And understand that this can still be your season to be successful. We'll see you on the next time.